Today, Sigma have announced the release of 3 brand new prime lenses in a range they have called the I series. And of these 3 new lenses, Sigma has been kind enough to lend me a copy of the 65mm f2 DGDN to test out and see what it's capable of. I think you're going to be impressed. First of all, sorry about the bulb over here. I know it's probably really annoying to look at, but I've just noticed it and I really cannot be asked to change it, so we're all gonna have to live with it. But anyway, let's start this video by quickly talking about this whole new line of I series lenses. As I've already mentioned, 3 new lenses have been announced today by Sigma. We have a copy of the 65mm f2, and that's the lens we'll be testing in this video, but there's also a brand new 35mm f2 and a 24mm f3.5. Sigma has also told us that the existing 45mm f2.8 lens that was released back in July of 2019 will also officially sit within this new I series collection to bring the grand total to 4 lenses. So Tom, what's the big deal about all these new lenses then, I hear you cry? Well, very good question. Essentially, what Sigma's tried to do here is create a new range of lenses that are designed specifically for photographers who use mirrorless cameras, who want to travel light, but don't really want to be stuck using cheap plasticky lenses with questionable image quality and not a very wide maximum aperture. So they claim that the I series range of lenses addresses exactly this problem, as the lenses are not only small and lightweight, but they're built with both exceptional image and build quality at the forefront of their design. Now, in terms of image quality, we're gonna just have to wait a few moments to see whether or not this claim is true or not once we've done our tests. But one thing I can say for certain right now is that in terms of build quality, there is absolutely no denying that Sigma have knocked this one out of the park. Now, I confess, so far, I've only been able to handle the 65mm lens in this range, but if all of the other lenses that they've announced are anywhere near as nicely built as this thing, then Sigma are potentially onto a real winner here. Okay, I feel like I've teased you enough with this, so let's take a closer look at the specs of this new 65mm f2 lens. Starting with the price, when this lens is officially released on the 1st of January 2021, it will be priced at £649 or $699, which, let's face it, isn't very cheap. But don't lose faith just yet, as this lens offers a lot in terms of build quality, and it will certainly help to explain the price once we go through some of the specs. Now, Sigma lenses have always been highly regarded for their build quality, but this thing takes it up to another notch for sure. This lens is entirely made from metal, and I mean everything. The body, the lens mount, even the focus ring and the lens hood are made from a textured metal, which just makes the whole thing feel super high quality. Also, check this shit out. Yep, that's right, it comes with a magnetized lens cap. How awesome is that? For all of the tech nerds that might be watching that and have just made a complete mess of their pants after seeing that display, I'll give you a few moments to tidy yourself up. I should also mention that if you don't like the idea of using this magnetic lens cap, then Sigma do also provide you with a plastic one in the box as well, so you can use that instead. Despite having a maximum aperture of f2 and being made entirely from metal, this lens actually only weighs 405 grams or 14.28 ounces, so it's pretty lightweight. When mounted to the front of my Sony a7 Mark III, you barely know it's there. I'm used to dealing with fairly heavy prime lenses on a day-to-day basis, so switching over to this thing for a day was an absolute dream. On the lens body itself, there's a manual aperture dial which clicks nicely at each third of a stop. However, unlike the other Sigma prime releases that we've seen this year that have featured a declick switch that allows you to declick this ring and rack through the aperture range in one smooth motion, there is no such thing on this lens, which might be a bit of bad news for videographers who like this feature. This dial can also be switched to automatic mode, noted as an A, which allows the lens to function more like a standard lens where you can adjust the aperture value using the back of your camera. The only problem is there is no lock switch for this dial, and subscribers to this channel will know that this issue is a bit of a bugbear for me, as having the manual aperture dial is just something I would never use personally, so I like to have the ability to lock this dial permanently into auto mode so I can just forget it exists. The downside to not having a lock switch means that this dial can accidentally be knocked from auto to some random aperture value in your bag or whilst you're carrying it on a camera strap, which can get a little bit annoying. In fairness to Sigma, the whole point of this lens was to keep it small and lightweight, and I guess adding additional switches could compromise that somewhat, so I guess I can't really grumble. Also on the side of the lens barrel, there's an MF to AF switch. Big deal, I hear you say. Well, yes, very good point. That's nothing new, but Sigma have given this switch a new design. It just feels super nice to operate. It is just a little bit of a shame that they didn't decide to just completely f this switch off entirely and instead put a lock switch in its place. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Not that I'm bitter or anything. Finally, on the lens mount, there's a small rubber O-ring that provides weather sealing to prevent dust and moisture getting inside your camera. So enough with all these specs, let's head over to our lens chart now and see what this thing can actually do in terms of image quality. So if we just open up the lens chart here, holy shit, that is some serious pincushion distortion. Okay, don't panic. If you're wondering why this image has more curves than Kim Kardashian, then I can explain. As with most of the DG-DN line of lenses that have all been designed specifically for mirrorless cameras, Sigma state that rather than combating lens distortion and vignetting issues in lens, they've instead opted to take advantage of Sony's in-camera lens compensation functionality. Now what this means is that in order to remove this type of distortion from your images, you first need to ensure that your lens comp setting is enabled in camera. And in fairness, when this is activated, the edges of the frame appear much straighter. However, I should add that this in-camera lens compensation is only applied to JPEG images and video files, so raw images will not be adjusted, which is a bit of a shitter. Like with most lenses, Adobe will eventually add their own lens correction profile to Lightroom and Photoshop in order to automatically correct for these issues once your raw files have been opened up into the software, but like anything in life, this always takes a bit of time, so for anyone planning to buy this lens on release day, unfortunately, you're probably going to need to fix this kind of distortion manually if this is something that bothers you. So back to the lens chart, if we zoom into the middle of the frame, we can see that when shooting wide open at f2, this lens is actually quite nice and sharp. At the edges of the frame, there is a fairly noticeable drop off in sharpness, and there are more signs of purple and green fringing starting to appear. Distortion issues aside though, for such a small lens, these results are pretty impressive so far, especially in terms of sharpness at the center. As always, I am a strong believer that in order to put a lens through its paces, you really have to take it out into the field and shoot with it for a day in a real life scenario. So that's exactly what I decided to do. So I took this thing out at sunset with my friend Monica to see what we could create. And overall, I was honestly really impressed with this lens from start to finish. Its lightweight and small frame made it really, really comfortable and nice to use when mounted on my Sony a7 Mark III. In terms of image quality, it didn't disappoint either, providing lovely sharp images with a nice fall off in the background. Obviously, with a maximum aperture of f2, you're not going to get that super smooth bokeh that you would with something like the Sigma 85mm f1.4 or even the Sigma 50mm f1.4, but the results you do achieve will certainly not disappoint. In our bokeh balls test, this lens did very well, offering really nice round orbs across the majority of the frame, with the balls only becoming slightly elliptical towards the edges of the frame. As for AF performance, the 65mm was almost faultless. For almost the entire sunset shoot, I was pointing the camera directly into the sunlight, and not once did it struggle to lock onto Monica's face when using face detect or IAF. Later on at the studio, I tested the AF again, this time without IAF, and the performance was just as impressive. The lens was able to switch focus between near and far subjects in an instant without any signs of hunting. In low light conditions, the performance was pretty much the same as well. It took the AF reticle a fraction longer to light up green just to confirm that the focus was locked on, but not enough time to be an issue. And again, there was absolutely no signs of hunting, so very impressive overall. As for AF noise, there is none. I mean, other than a very quiet chirping noise that you really wouldn't notice unless you were absolutely trying to listen out for it. Switching over to video mode, and the lens was able to track a moving target coming towards the camera with absolutely no issues whatsoever. The performance was just as good when the subject was moving at a fast pace towards the camera too. So with all of the testing done, what is my verdict on this new lens? Well, in a sentence, if you're looking for a portrait lens that is super lightweight, but also really high quality, then this thing really ticks all of the boxes. Yeah, okay, it's not the cheapest lens in the world, but for your money, you get an extremely nicely put together piece of kit. It's by far one of the best built lenses that I've handled in a while, and all of the dials and switches operate really nicely with high precision, and the metal build means that this thing is probably built to last. Anyway, that about wraps it up for this review. Let me know what you think about this lens and also the Sigma I series in general in the comments below. I'm personally really looking forward to getting my hands on the other lenses in this series to see whether they are just as good as the 65mm. Obviously, this video has been released a little bit earlier than usual. We usually release videos on a Friday, but that's just because we needed to fit it in with today's announcement from Sigma about this lens and the I series. So as a bit of a bonus to you guys, I'll also be releasing another video this week on Friday, which will be the full behind the scenes video of our shoot with Monica, where we tested this lens out for the very first time. So make sure you keep an eye out for that this Friday. In the meantime though, if you've liked this video, then please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Obviously, with a maximum aperture of f2, you're not gonna get that super smooth. In terms of image quality, it didn't disappoint either, providing lovely